Dawn breaks over the siege line with the mechanical precision of an artillery barrage, measured not in minutes, but in the 90 seconds allocated for morning stand to. The ritual begins before light touches the parapet, when shadows still pool in shell craters like stagnant blood. 1,000 identical figures stir in the trenches, each performing the same sequence: palm to valve, twist the filter until the click resonates through canvas gloves, draw air, and listen for the steady hiss that confirms another day of breathing, borrowed time. In the communication trench, a quartermaster's gloved finger moves down columns in a leather-bound ledger, marking tallies with methodical strokes. The ink is brown rather than black, a detail that becomes significant only when one considers the scarcity of conventional materials in a world where everything organic has been reduced to ash. His pen scratches against parchment, processed from corpse starch, recording numbers that represent lives expended, equipment recovered, quotas satisfied. Each mark carries the weight of bureaucratic sacrament. The morning light catches a Kriegsman's identity seal as he adjusts his respirator with practiced movements. The stamped metal disc swings gently against his greatcoat where a name should hang. The surface bears only numerals: 84723. Regiment, company, individual designation. Nothing more. The seal serves as both inventory tag and theological statement, proof that a piece of equipment exists in the correct place at the correct time, and that individual identity contradicts the collective penance that defines existence here. This is our promise, to examine Krieg not as legend or propaganda, but as a lived system where guilt has crystallized into governance and human bodies have been reduced to arithmetic. We will trace the mechanisms that transform children into numbers, hope into compliance, and death into currency. We will map the institutions that treat flesh as raw material and souls as accounting entries. The macro perspective reveals a rad-scarred world orbiting its dying star, like a penitent's prayer wheel, each rotation marking another tithe of blood offered to the Imperium's endless hunger. Krieg's underground cities function as manufactories of redemption, producing regiments with the same industrial efficiency once applied to mining equipment and chemical weapons. From that atomic-scarred surface, a policy emerged: prove loyalty by expending lives until the account balances. At the meso level, we observe the regiment as factory, the quartermaster as priest. Command structures operate through liturgical precision, where orders are delivered as catechisms and compliance is measured in acceptable loss ratios. The Death Korps functions not as an army, but as a processing system, converting guilt into tactical advantage through methodical application of human resources. Each trench bay serves as a work cell, each work cell outputting hours under fire, according to predetermined specifications. The micro details reveal the deeper mechanics. Masks are rarely removed, a fact extending beyond practical necessity into ritual significance. The respirator becomes discipline made visible, and to remove it without order confesses that air matters more than obedience. Identity seals replace names because names imply individuality, and individuality contradicts doctrine. Letters are written daily but never answered, creating the illusion of connection while reinforcing fundamental isolation. The Kriegsman writes to no one he will ever see, about days that vary only by how the wind carries gas. These mechanisms interlock with mechanical perfection. The quartermaster values corpses and carbines with identical bureaucratic precision, because both serve the same function. Tools to be expended in service of redemption. His assistants move along the firing step, noting who fell and which weapons remain recoverable without hazard. The inventory of death follows orderly procedures. A corpse becomes a line item assigned a destination. A carbine becomes a line item reassigned to living hands. The ritual that keeps poison out also keeps people in. Straps are tightened in sequence because sequence resists panic. Speech remains clipped because the mask steals half of every word. The body adapts to being its own weather, breath warming and condensing and returning in endless cycles. There is no room for self inside rubber and doctrine. That is partly the point. On Krieg, the body is a tool. The tool's value is measured after it breaks. This is not rhetorical flourish, but procedural truth. The departamento that governs armies governs through paper, wax, and arithmetic, setting quotas for munitions, for hours under bombardment, for kilometers advanced per 1,000 casualties. The quartermaster's ledger mirrors those forms in miniature, a pocket-sized version of the Empire's conscience. As morning stand to concludes, the quartermaster closes his ledger with a sound like a lid on a box no one opens in daylight. In the margins, written in careful script, are notations that require explanation. Heresy years, inherited debt. The first entry points not to present circumstances, but to foundational sins, hinting at the colossal transgression that sentenced an entire world to this endless, self-imposed purgatory. Those marginal notations translate from High Gothic into administrative categories that compress planetary catastrophe into filing systems. Heresy years marks the duration of rebellion. Inherited debt quantifies the residual obligation across generations. 15 centuries ago, these were not accounting terms, but the opening movements of a civil war that would transform guilt into governance and trauma into tithe policy. The rebellion began with familiar grievances. Krieg's planetary governor declared independence from imperial taxation, citing conscription quotas that stripped the world's mining guilds and chemical manufactories beyond sustainable levels. His forces controlled orbital defenses and maintained order through conventional military authority. The rebellion lasted 18 months, during which imperial tax collectors were expelled and tithe shipments suspended. The governor commanded significant support among industrial workers who viewed imperial demands as economic strangulation. The loyalist response eliminated negotiation as possibility. Colonel Jurten of the Krieg 83rd Regiment faced a choice between duty and blood. The rebellious governor was his father. The colonel chose the Imperium. When diplomatic solutions failed and orbital bombardment proved insufficient against hardened positions, Colonel Jurten authorized atomic weapons deployment against his own world. The decision required no external approval. He possessed both tactical authority and moral certainty that heresy demanded absolute correction. The atomic purification lasted 72 hours. Warheads targeted population centers, industrial complexes, and agricultural zones with systematic thoroughness. 97% of Krieg's surface became uninhabitable wasteland. The atmosphere poisoned, and oceans boiled into radioactive vapor. Approximately 4 billion civilians died in the initial bombardment. The remaining 3% of habitable terrain consisted of underground installations where loyalist forces maintained defensive positions against both heretical survivors and an environment that had become actively hostile to human life. Colonel Jerton chose continued resistance rather than negotiated surrender. The underground siege lasted 500 years. During those centuries beneath a dead sky, the surviving loyalists developed the ideological framework that governs modern Krieg. Children born in pressure shelters learned that surface light meant death, that their ancestors' sins had scorched the world, and that existence itself represented both debt and opportunity for repayment. Survival became evidence of insufficient devotion. Comfort contradicted penance. Individual desire conflicted with collective redemption. The siege mentality crystallized into religious doctrine through necessity, repetition, and the systematic elimination of alternatives. When Imperial forces finally relieved the siege, they discovered a population that had transformed suffering into sacrament. The Departamento Munitorum's post-war assessment recognized both tactical value and administrative convenience in Krieg's self-imposed penance. Rather than rebuilding conventional planetary governance, the Departamento codified the death cult into imperial policy through carefully drafted edicts that converted historical trauma into ongoing military production. The redemption schedules emerged from those negotiations between grief and bureaucracy. Departamento actuaries calculated the precise number of lives required to balance the heretical account, factoring variables including years of rebellion, economic damage, and interest compounded across centuries. The mathematics produced specific quotas, regiments to be raised annually, decades of service to be rendered per citizen, acceptable loss ratios to be maintained until the planetary obligation achieved resolution through systematic expenditure of human resources. Tithe requirements transformed human lives into currency, with exchange rates determined by bureaucratic formula. Standard Imperial Guard regiments counted as baseline value. Siege specialists commanded premium rates due to specialized training costs. Casualties in major campaigns earned bonus credits toward redemption totals. The system treated death as both payment and product, creating economic incentives for tactical doctrines that maximized the efficient expenditure of Kriegsmen according to predetermined schedules. This institutional logic transformed survival from virtue into administrative problem. To live beyond assigned operational parameters suggested insufficient commitment to collective redemption. Veterans who accumulated excessive service years faced reassignment to higher risk duties or training positions, where their experience could reproduce doctrine in fresh recruits. The mathematics eliminated room for individual heroism that might contradict the systematic nature of planetary penance. Krieg's governmental structure reflects these priorities through institutional design that fuses military command with ecclesiastical authority. The Planetary Defense Force operates as both army and church, its officers holding dual appointments as combat leaders and redemption administrators. Their authority extends beyond battlefield effectiveness into civilian governance, education policy, and population management according to doctrinal requirements rather than individual welfare. The Kresh Vault system represents the policy's most systematic achievement. Children are separated from parents at age 5, preventing family bonds that might compromise loyalty to collective mission. Parents surrender children through ceremonial transfer, receiving identity seals as receipts for their contribution to planetary redemption. The children enter institutional care designed to shape identity according to doctrinal requirements rather than individual temperament, family tradition, or personal inclination. Vitae womb facilities complete the system's architecture. These underground complexes function as psychological manufactories, where guilt is engineered from birth through environmental design, educational programming, and systematic conditioning. Children learn catechisms before speech, practice drill movements before walking, and internalize death as aspiration before understanding life as alternative. The death cult that defines modern Krieg represents manufactured penance administered through institutional design rather than natural spiritual evolution. Every mechanism serves specific administrative purposes, maintaining tithe quotas, producing compliant soldiers, and converting historical trauma into ongoing bureaucratic efficiency. To meet the tables, the system discovered, you do not merely birth bodies. You manufacture the souls that will inhabit them and consent to their systematic expenditure. The institutional framework that transforms trauma into policy requires human raw material shaped according to precise specifications. In the Kresh vaults beneath Krieg's poisoned surface, Cohort 847 enters a system designed to manufacture souls as efficiently as any munitions factory produces shells. The children who arrive carrying nothing but ceremonial transferred documents will leave as numbered inventory, their consciousness calibrated for systematic expenditure. Morning begins before the artificial dawn, when recycled air carries the taste of metal shavings and antiseptic through underground chambers. Ration drills teach the first lesson in scarcity through measured portions of corpse starch and reclaimed water, each serving calculated to provide growth without comfort. Children stand in formation while instructors distribute bowls filled to etched lines, learning that hunger represents natural condition rather than deprivation. Those who finish quickly must wait while others struggle with nausea. Those who cannot finish surrender portions to common stores without complaint. Appetite becomes arithmetic, and arithmetic becomes virtue. Catechism recitation replaces lullabies with doctrine that shapes consciousness through repetition. The children chant litanies before sleep, and upon waking, memorizing words whose meaning seeps into subconsciousness, like the recycled air they breathe. I am debt-made flesh. I am payment rendered willing. I am tool-shaped for breaking. The phrases become familiar through endless repetition until meaning dissolves into sound, sound into breath, breath into the steady rhythm that will later synchronize with respirator filters. Handwriting practice corrects small fingers for the paperwork that governs military life. Nibs scratch casualty returns and requisition forms in perfect blocks, each digit squared, each letter identical. The children copy documents that list ammunition, filters, bandage rolls, and bodies by the hundred, learning literacy through bureaucracy rather than literature. A teacher's gloved palm presses each page flat, while red wax seals corners with tiny cog and skull icons. Education serves institutional requirements rather than individual curiosity. They also practice letter writing without addressees, a refined cruelty that teaches futility through form. Each exercise specifies no recipient, no dates, only ritual lines copied in careful script. I perform my duty. I await absolution. Pages fold twice and drop through brass slots in chamber walls, swallowed by machinery without sound. When children ask where letters go, instructors answer in liturgy. all true words return to the work. The sentence provides both comfort and warning, its full meaning reserved for later revelation. The white match test at age 8 transforms children into provisional soldiers through respirator-fitting ceremony. Each child receives canvas masks sized for growing faces, rubber seals stiff from manufactories. Instructors light candles and hold flames near filter housings, while children breathe through unfamiliar equipment. Flame movement detects leaks, but deeper purposes govern the ritual. Children who hesitate before donning masks earn prayer shifts and reduced rations until compliance becomes automatic. The mask represents protection and submission simultaneously, keeping poison out while suppressing individual identity. Surnames dissolve into numbers through administrative processes that treat names as variants from standardized production. Children learn numerical designations rather than family connections, understanding that identity represents bureaucratic convenience rather than personal significance. Family bonds are severed through institutional design that pathologizes parental attachment as operational liability. Siblings become cohort mates, and affection becomes variance from acceptable parameters, requiring correction through increased drill time. Militarum audits arrive quarterly, bringing clerks with red ink who circle numbers in ledgers while adjusting resource allocations. The auditors calculate oxygen budgets based on projected growth rates, determining atmospheric mixtures required to sustain developing soldiers without waste. Caloric intake measurements are adjusted against physical development, producing compliant soldiers rather than healthy individuals. Every child becomes a data point in optimization calculations that treat human development as manufacturing process subject to efficiency improvements. The night burial lullaby normalizes mass death through song that transforms horror into comfort. Instructors sing verses describing bodies arranged in neat rows, identity seals collected in proper order, equipment redistributed according to protocols. The melody carries gentle rhythm that soothes children to sleep, while lyrics prepare them for environments where death operates as routine administrative function. The lullaby teaches that dying serves biological necessity, contributing to institutional objectives. Identity seals are issued during childhood, like inventory tags, stamped metal discs threaded on cord that hang against developing hearts. The seals carry numerical designations rather than names, manufacturing dates rather than birthdays, unit assignments rather than family connections. Children learn to check seals each morning, ensuring metal remains legible and cord shows no wear that might compromise post-combat identification procedures. Adolescence concludes with the faceless oath ceremony that formally erases remaining individual identity. Each adolescent swears loyalty, while surrendering personal desires to collective mission, reciting vows that replace individual fears with standardized expectations. The ceremony assigns final numerical designations that will follow them through military service until death provides administrative closure. Their first shipment leaves the vault in transport vehicles, carrying cargo rather than passengers. The adolescents entering those trucks have been systematically shaped for expenditure through institutional design that treats consciousness as raw material, processed according to predetermined specifications. They carry no personal possessions, maintain no individual relationships, and harbor no expectations beyond efficient performance until operational parameters require replacement. Tools await to complete their shaping. The transport vehicles discharge their human cargo at supply depots, where manufactured souls receive the tools that will define their remaining existence. Under vault lights the color of old bone, adolescents form ranks beside crates stenciled with serial codes and catechisms, learning that their world will now fit into regulation packs, belts, and steady hands. The issuing ceremony begins with liturgical precision. A clerk reads numbers. A quartermaster's assistant responds with identical numbers and corresponding equipment, each exchange recorded twice in ledgers that treat flesh and materiel with identical bureaucratic devotion. The greatcoat arrives first, heavy wool dyed the color of wet ash, its weight calculated for bodies that will fill it through muscle development or bloat from corpse starch rations, whichever operational requirements produce first. Prayer fragments etch the brass buttons in Gothic script, too small for easy reading, transforming routine fastening into acts of devotion. The coat hangs loose on teenage frames, sized for the anonymous uniformity that makes individual recognition both impossible and irrelevant in environments where visibility means death. Each entrenching tool carries blessings inscribed by tech priests who understand that excavation serves sacred as well as tactical purposes. The blades bear mechanicum symbols requesting machine spirit cooperation during duties that will range from digging, fighting positions, to preparing graves. The tool's balance calculated for efficiency in soil conditions from frozen mud to corpse-saturated earth. When ammunition runs short, the consecrated edge serves equally well for breaking enemy skulls, its dual nature reflecting the practical theology that governs Krieg's approach to warfare. Standard last rifles arrive bearing devotional inscriptions, worn smooth by countless previous owners, their prayers absorbed into metal through use and maintenance rituals that blend technical necessity with religious observance. The weapons function reliably in chemical environments where conventional firearms corrode, their power cells designed for extended operations, in atmospheres that kill unprotected humans within minutes. Each rifle receives individual blessing during distribution, treating weapons as sacred objects whose accuracy depends on both mechanical precision and spiritual alignment. Gas capes hang from shoulders like vestments, their rubberized fabric converting soldiers into walking shrines dedicated to survival through preparation. The capes provide chemical protection while serving multiple secondary functions: shelter during rest periods, camouflage in contaminated terrain, and sealed integration with respirator systems that create personal atmospheres independent of environmental conditions. Brass fittings attach capes to mask assemblies with mechanical precision that reflects years of refinement through operational necessity. Bayonets complete personal armament through blades etched with regimental numbers and blessing marks that identify both unit assignment and spiritual protection. Beyond their obvious combat applications, the weapons serve as tools for equipment maintenance, wire cutting, and food preparation, their blessed edges performing mundane tasks with the same devotional efficiency applied to killing. Each bayonet receives individual consecration that treats the weapon as extension of the soldier's devotional commitment rather than mere equipment. Spare filter canisters represent life measured in hours rather than years, each unit stamped with expiration dates and blessing seals that guarantee both mechanical function and spiritual protection. The canisters become currency in underground economies, where breath itself requires rationing according to operational priorities and supply availability, their distribution controlled by clerks whose administrative decisions determine survival intervals, measured in filter hours rather than chronological time. Corpse starch rations arrive sealed in packages marked with nutritional calculations designed to sustain combat operations without providing comfort that might compromise effectiveness. The processed remains of previous soldiers return through industrial recycling systems that waste nothing organic, their flavor engineered to eliminate preference or revulsion while delivering calculated nutrition. Each package tastes identical regardless of source material, the uniformity serving psychological as well as practical purposes. One glass ampule accompanies each kit, clear liquid sealed beneath a brass cross that gleams despite underground storage conditions. The ampule's purpose remains deliberately unstated during distribution ceremonies, its placement among medical supplies suggesting therapeutic rather than recreational application, while creating uncertainty that serves institutional purposes through mystery rather than knowledge. Soldiers learn its weight against their hearts without understanding its ultimate function. Supply chains extend these personal items into industrial systems that treat warfare as manufacturing process governed by religious devotion. Phosgene shells emerge from Krieg's underground manufactoria, bearing production stamps and blessing ceremonies performed by tech priests who sanctify chemical weapons through ritual purification. Artillery pieces receive similar treatment, their barrels inscribed with accuracy prayers and range calculations that blend ballistics with theology, each gun blessed before disassembly and shipping to ensure both mechanical reliability and spiritual alignment. Promethium drums carry purity seals, guaranteeing fuel quality and divine protection, their contents blessed by priests who understand that flame serves redemptive purposes beyond mere destruction. The drums fuel flamethrowers, vehicle engines, and crematory furnaces that process organic waste according to doctrinal requirements rather than sanitary necessity, each application contributing to the systematic purification that defines Krieg's operational philosophy. Departamento paperwork transforms administrative necessity into liturgical practice through forms sealed with wax and ash rather than conventional materials. Requisition requests become prayers for material support. Inventory reports function as confessions of resource stewardship, and supply manifests serve as testimony regarding proper distribution of sacred equipment. Clerks perform bureaucratic duties with religious devotion, understanding that paperwork governs souls as effectively as supplies, each signature and seal contributing to the institutional machinery that converts guilt into military efficiency. Ration distribution follows hierarchical systems that reinforce military structure through nutrition management, calculated to sustain bodies while maintaining psychological dependence. Grey rations provide line infantry with minimum sustenance through thin bars, bitter recaf, and mineral tablets that grind teeth while delivering essential nutrients. White rations support grenadier units whose specialized duties require enhanced nutrition for extended combat effectiveness, their contents including fat supplements and additional stimulants. Black rations punish penal squads through deliberate deficiency that weakens bodies while maintaining operational capability. Their reduced caloric content serving as constant reminder of transgression, requiring redemption through performance. The distribution system includes one detail that reveals deeper institutional logic. Rations increase one tier before major assaults, transforming grey to white and white to enhanced specifications. This elevation serves purposes beyond mere sustenance, creating psychological preparation that treats improved nutrition as sacrament preceding sacrifice rather than reward for service. The temporary abundance highlighting the systematic scarcity that normally governs existence. Engineers work in pre-dawn fog, assembling defensive positions with wire and stakes that arrive blessed by priests who understand fortifications serve spiritual as well as tactical purposes. They move through mist that tastes of machine oil and recycled breath, carrying spools on their backs like penitent shells, while engineers perform maintenance rites on artillery pieces. These ceremonies blend mechanical necessity with religious observance, treating weapons as sacred objects requiring both technical competence and spiritual devotion to ensure proper function when redemption demands their use. Survival economies emerge through artificial scarcity that reinforces institutional dependence rather than individual initiative. Filter replacements flow according to clerks' administrative decisions and unit loss rates, creating shortages that prevent soldiers from accumulating personal reserves, while ensuring that survival requires constant institutional support. Veterans trade gloves for filters for dry corners in dugouts, each exchange governed by scarcity. That makes breath itself a commodity subject to bureaucratic control. The kit answers an environment designed to consume both equipment and operators through systematic attrition, each item calibrated for conditions where survival depends on institutional support rather than individual preparation. Tools and souls face identical operational pressures in trenches, where mud grips boots with the same relentless persistence that Doctrine grips consciousness. We must enter that environment to understand how manufactured souls and consecrated equipment interact under conditions where both serve the same inexorable mathematics of redemption through expenditure. The environment that consumes equipment and operators reveals itself through the grinding routine of forward trench rotation, where manufactured souls encounter conditions designed to test both material and morale through systematic attrition. Dawn stand to begins 40 minutes before artificial light penetrates the perpetual haze, each Kriegsman rising with mechanical precision to perform gas-check litanies that replace morning prayers with technical necessity. Filter secure, seal tested, breath drawn clean. The words ripple down fire steps in whispered unison, creating acoustic camouflage, while confirming that another day of borrowed breathing has begun. Wiring parties prepare for night operations during these pre-dawn hours, their movements synchronized by conditioning that treats individual survival as secondary to collective mission completion. They crawl into no man's land under cover of artillery that provides both concealment and psychological comfort through familiar percussion, dragging coils of razor wire through mud that contains more organic matter than soil. Each strand receives blessing before deployment, transforming defensive preparation into devotional practice that treats fortification as prayer made manifest through steel and systematic suffering. Below ground level, sappers press stethoscopes to tunnel walls, listening for countermining operations that might collapse entire sections without warning. the listening, posts require absolute silence, while operators detect pickaxe strikes and whispered conversations through vibrations transmitted by Earth that serves as conductor for both intelligence and death. A sapper marks coordinates on dampened paper, his graphite stub recording threats that exist only as sound and dread, each notation contributing to defensive calculations that treat underground warfare as acoustic mathematics requiring both technical precision and devotional patience. Vox operators maintain communication networks through equipment that functions despite chemical contamination, their transmissions mixing coordinate data with catechisms that transform military communications into liturgical practice. Between artillery corrections and casualty reports, they recite prayers requesting divine guidance for shells seeking targets and souls seeking absolution, each broadcast contributing to information networks that treat tactical coordination as religious observance, requiring spiritual devotion alongside technical competence. Latrines represent the endless cycle of construction, destruction, and reconstruction that defines trench warfare through necessities that enemy artillery targets with methodical precision. Positions dug at dawn face obliteration by noon, requiring constant relocation that treats sanitation as tactical problem subject to enemy interdiction. The work continues regardless of bombardment, soldiers excavating replacement facilities, while shells crater previous locations, their persistence demonstrating institutional priorities that place collective hygiene above individual safety through administrative mandate rather than tactical wisdom. In quiet moments between bombardments, Kriegsman 847-23 performs his daily letter-writing ritual with ceremonial precision that transforms futility into devotion. His gloved fingers grip a pencil worn smooth by previous owners, pressing lead against paper that absorbs moisture from air heavy with chemical residue. The content follows ritualized format learned in creche vaults. I perform my duty. I await absolution. Ink smears across damp surfaces where breath condenses against mask interior. But writing continues with mechanical precision that treats communication as sacrament rather than correspondence. He folds each letter with ceremonial care. Despite understanding its destination lies beyond human contact, the ritual providing psychological structure through meaningless repetition that maintains sanity within systems designed to eliminate individual initiative. Small economies of grace persist within regulations that govern every aspect of existence through bureaucratic precision. Veterans quietly swap fresh filters into younger soldiers' masks without words or acknowledgement, their actions violating supply protocols while demonstrating humanity that survives institutional conditioning. These exchanges occur during shift changes, when observation becomes difficult, creating informal networks that provide mutual support through violations that treat individual welfare as secondary to collective compliance, yet somehow endure within spaces that Doctrine cannot entirely penetrate. The quartermaster's team moves through trenches like undertakers conducting business that requires both administrative precision and pastoral discretion. They tag casualties with identification numbers, tally recoverable equipment according to standardized procedures, and maintain ledgers that record deaths as inventory adjustments rather than human losses. When eyes watch too closely and circumstances warrant intervention beyond standard protocols, They produce glass ampules with whispered prayers that transform medical supplies into sacramental objects. The mercy ampule serves purposes that remain deliberately undefined through institutional policy, maintaining operational flexibility through administrative ambiguity. Its dispensation criteria, known only to those who calculate acceptable suffering according to bureaucratic rather than medical standards. Identity seals are snipped from casualties with cable cutters designed for wire work, the metal discs collected in leather pouches that organize death through systems requiring proper documentation. Each seal represents both individual termination and administrative completion, its removal marking transition from active personnel to processed inventory subject to different accounting procedures that treat human remains as equipment requiring disposition through channels maintaining institutional records while eliminating physical evidence according to environmental requirements. The dead become infrastructure through practical necessity that transforms casualties into construction materials when conventional resources prove unavailable. Bodies fill sandbags, their mass providing ballistic protection while serving purposes that honor service through continued utility. Trench walls incorporate organic matter through engineering techniques that maximize available resources, treating human remains as materials subject to structural requirements rather than religious observance. Though psychological impact reinforces doctrinal messages regarding individual expendability in service of collective objectives measured through quotas rather than tactical advantage. This grinding routine requires discipline that sustains manufactured souls through conditions designed to break both body and consciousness through systematic application of hardship, calculated to produce compliance rather than mutiny. The mechanisms that maintain order, despite circumstances that would normally produce desertion, operate through doctrinal conditioning that transforms suffering into evidence of proper function rather than system failure. We must examine those doctrines that compel bodies forward into mathematics, where survival represents variance from acceptable parameters, and death provides administrative closure, satisfying institutional requirements through human expenditure, calculated by clerks who measure souls with identical precision applied to ammunition inventories. The doctrines that compel bodies forward operate through control mechanisms designed to eliminate variance from predetermined parameters, treating human behavior as engineering problem, requiring systematic correction rather than moral guidance. Commissars patrol trench bays with mechanical regularity, their movements timed like metronomes, measuring the rhythm of institutional compliance. They recite articles of faith and articles of war in alternating sequences, creating unified doctrine where spiritual transgression and tactical failure receive identical administrative response. Correction occurs through removal rather than punishment, understanding that efficiency demands replacement of malfunctioning components, rather than repair attempts that compromise operational schedules. The bolt pistol remains holstered during routine patrols, its threat administered through institutional authority rather than personal intimidation. A Kriegsman who hesitates during stand-to, questions coordinates during briefings, or displays excessive concern for individual survival phases, reassignment through administrative processes that treat inadequate performance as system malfunction. The transition involves no formal proceedings, merely notation in ledgers that reclassify personnel according to operational requirements, transforming soldiers into inventory subject to reallocation when specifications prove insufficient. Penal sections move through trenches identified by black ration satchels that mark their bearers as expendable resources subject to accelerated consumption. Their reduced nutrition serves both practical and psychological purposes, weakening bodies while reinforcing the consequences of deviation from acceptable parameters. These units form assault spearheads, where Doctrine requires maximum expenditure with minimum tactical investment. Their mortality rates approaching statistical certainty through assignment to objectives calculated for elimination rather than completion. Grenadier squads represent the system's opposite pole, rehearsing room clearance operations with religious precision that transforms tactical training into devotional practice. Their white ration satchels provide enhanced nutrition, supporting specialized duties, while their coordination emerges through conditioning that eliminates individual initiative while maximizing collective effectiveness. Each movement follows prescribed sequences, learned through repetition, until muscle memory replaces conscious decision-making, creating human machinery calibrated for specific operational requirements. Core siege doctrine reduces warfare to mathematical formulae contained in documents bearing official seals and blessing marks. Creeping barrages advance at predetermined rates timed to heartbeats rather than ground conditions, their precision calculated to provide psychological comfort through familiar percussion while clearing defensive positions according to schedule rather than tactical observation. Gas screens deploy like incense during religious ceremonies, their chemical clouds providing concealment while serving theological purposes that transform environmental modification into purification ritual requiring technical precision and devotional commitment. Assault waves receive scheduling through Loss Rate Table 6b, clinical documents featuring columns for expected redemptive yield and variance tolerance. These calculations treat ground gained and lives lost as equally significant variables in equations designed to optimize resource utilization according to bureaucratic requirements rather than battlefield necessity. Engineers cut wire under fire according to timetables that ignore casualty projections, their work continuing despite losses because Doctrine requires completion regardless of human cost. Flamers advance into defensive positions, with weapons blessed for purification duties, their operators accepting mortality rates approaching statistical certainty, while understanding that function requires expenditure rather than preservation. The central contradiction emerges through regulations that criminalize survival beyond assigned operational parameters. Soldiers who exceed predicted survival durations face administrative review evaluating continued existence as failure to prosecute objectives with sufficient devotion. This bureaucratic sin receives punishment through reassignment to duties carrying enhanced mortality expectations, treating individual persistence as evidence of inadequate commitment rather than tactical competence deserving recognition. Militarum variance defines the statistical tolerance within which death receives classification as productive expenditure rather than wasteful loss. The variance calculations determine whether casualties contribute to redemptive objectives or represent administrative failure requiring procedural correction. Survival outside these parameters becomes variance, requiring adjustment through reassignment, ration reduction, or enhanced disciplinary measures designed to restore statistical compliance with projections generated by clerks who measure souls through identical precision applied to ammunition inventories. This doctrine treats human life as ammunition, subject to management principles governing conventional military supplies, expended efficiently through calculated deployment, accounted precisely through administrative procedures, replaced systematically through recruitment processes, maintaining operational capability regardless of individual losses. Personnel receive evaluation through metrics measuring expenditure rates rather than survival statistics, their value determined by contribution to collective objectives rather than personal achievement or tactical innovation that might contradict established procedures. The system operates through institutional logic, eliminating individual agency, while maximizing collective compliance, treating soldiers as components in machinery designed to convert human resources into territorial gains through calculations, ignoring moral considerations in favor of mathematical precision. Plans crystallize into action through orders transforming statistical projections into battlefield reality, where manufactured souls encounter conditions designed to test doctrinal conditioning against environmental pressures, measuring devotion through willingness to advance into mathematics, where survival represents administrative error, requiring systematic correction through elimination. Orders crystallize into action at 0347 hours, when artillery preparation begins lifting in calculated stages, each battery adjusting elevation according to timetables, synchronized with chronometers that measure redemption in minutes rather than mercy. The pre-dawn sky bleeds chemical colors as signal flares paint fog green and gold, creating visibility corridors where doctrine requires advance regardless of defensive response. 1,000 identical figures perform final equipment checks with mechanical precision. Masks tightened until rubber seals press flesh into compliance, gas capes secured with brass fittings that transform soldiers into walking shrines dedicated to systematic expenditure. Designation 72491 waits on the fire step with his world narrowed to breath sounds and explosive percussion, each inhalation measured against filter capacity, while artillery shells provide metronome rhythm for advance into mathematics, where individual survival represents statistical variance requiring correction. His identity seal catches the chemical light, stamped metal where a name should hang, while his greatcoat hangs heavy with moisture that tastes of metal and institutional certainty. Engineers advance first through wire obstacles with bleeding hands, their cutters blessed for purification duties, while blood seeps through canvas gloves torn by razor edges designed to channel attackers into predetermined killing zones. They work according to doctrine requiring completion regardless of casualty projections, their progress measured in meters cleared per minute rather than lives preserved per objective. Behind them, machine gun fire combs the field in mechanical patterns calculated to achieve maximum efficiency through overlapping fields that treat advancing bodies as inventory requiring systematic elimination. Grenadier squads move through gas clouds with flamer units, whose blessed weapons serve dual purposes: tactical clearance and theological purification of positions contaminated by heretical occupation. The chemical screens drift across no man's land, like incense from a vast altar, providing concealment while serving sacramental functions, that transform environmental modification into purification ritual requiring both technical precision and devotional commitment. Ground becomes mixture of flesh, cordite, and irradiated mud, where individual identity dissolves into organic matter serving infrastructure purposes. Bodies provide ballistic protection, while their mass absorbs projectiles intended for advancing soldiers, each casualty contributing to collective mission through continued utility after administrative termination. The mud grips boots with persistence that mirrors doctrinal conditioning, refusing release while drawing strength from organic matter that once carried personal hopes, now reduced to construction materials. Mercy ampules appear in gloved hands, like sacramental objects when medical intervention cannot restore operational capability. A quartermaster's assistant kneels beside a Kriegsman whose mask hangs torn, presses clear glass against teeth, cracks the brass cross with practiced thumb, and guides liquid to the soft place at the throat. The prayer remains short and private. Eyes close, because ledger entries accumulate with identical precision applied to ammunition expenditure, creating administrative balance between resources consumed and objectives achieved through calculations that treat human consciousness as inventory subject to disposition when specifications prove inadequate. A regimental standard plants itself in a crater halfway to the designated objective, its tattered fabric catching chemical wind while brass fittings gleam despite environmental contamination. The image captures both triumph and futility in single frame, progress measured through territorial acquisition, while casualties mount beyond sustainable levels, creating tactical success requiring administrative interpretation to distinguish achievement from disaster. The standard marks ground purchased through human currency, according to exchange rates calculated by statisticians rather than strategists. The assault stalls against secondary defensive lines, where doctrine encounters reality through positions prepared for systematic elimination of attacking forces. Advance becomes impossible, while retreat violates operational parameters, creating tactical deadlock requiring administrative resolution. Vox equipment crackles with transmission requesting guidance. Reinforce or withdraw? The question travels through command hierarchy, seeking authority capable of modifying predetermined parameters when circumstances contradict planning assumptions. The Commissar's bolt pistol provides answer through administrative action that eliminates variance from acceptable parameters. The weapon's discharge serves institutional requirements rather than tactical necessity, its percussion marking transition from tactical problem to administrative solution through removal of personnel whose questions compromise operational compliance. The sound carries across battlefield like punctuation mark concluding debate that doctrine resolves through elimination rather than discussion. Designation 72491 survives the mathematics, slumped behind corpse mound, with mask hissing through damaged filter housing. His existence represents statistical anomaly, requiring administrative correction through procedures designed to restore compliance with projections. A clerk moves through smoke carrying red stamp, marking his gloved hand with designation indicating reassignment to duties carrying enhanced mortality expectations. The stamp reads, redeployed, its bureaucratic terminology, converting survival into administrative problem, requiring systematic resolution through accelerated expenditure. The quartermaster closes his ledger as dawn breaks without sunrise, only dilution of darkness that makes all things flat. Ink mixes with blood and mud, while entries balance according to accounting principles, treating human resources as ammunition subject to inventory management. His calculations record bodies subtracted, ground gained, and quotas satisfied through operations designed to optimize resource utilization regardless of individual cost. The arithmetic achieves completion through mathematical precision that converts tactical engagement into administrative success measured through statistics rather than strategic advantage. Around him, assistants move among the remains to make the field tidy in the way battlefields are made tidy. Identity seals snipped with cable cutters, equipment catalogued, bodies processed according to environmental requirements. The dawn reveals ground purchased through human currency, at exchange rates determined by bureaucratic calculation rather than battlefield necessity, creating tactical archaeology where individual stories dissolve into statistical aggregation serving institutional requirements. Aftermath requires different mathematics as surviving personnel undergo processing designed to account for variance from projected casualty rates. The ledger shows ratios rather than victories, its columns recording what purchase has been made and at what exchange rate. Those who outlasted their designated wave duration face administrative correction through systematic procedures that restore statistical compliance with institutional projections, their continued existence representing mathematical problems requiring resolution through accelerated expenditure, according to formulas that measure souls with identical precision applied to ammunition inventories. The mathematics of expenditure demand immediate reconciliation through salvage operations that transform battlefield aftermath into administrative exercise governed by protocols treating human remains as inventory requiring systematic processing. Night crews move across contested ground with lantern-guided precision, their hooded lights creating orderly lanes through terrain where individual identity has dissolved into organic matter serving infrastructure purposes. The ground yields beneath each step more saturated sponge than soil, releasing chemical odors that mix cordite residue with decomposition accelerated by lime treatment and environmental contamination. Identity seals receive priority collection through procedures using cable snips designed for electrical work, each metal disc dropping into leather pouches with soft chimes that mark administrative completion. The stamped numerals catch lantern light briefly before disappearing into organizational systems that treat death as inventory transfer, requiring proper documentation. Usable equipment undergoes cataloging through standardized evaluation criteria. Lass rifles cleared of mud and tagged for redistribution. Bayonets matched to scabbards according to serial numbers. Gas capes inspected for tears that might compromise protective capability. Ammunition extraction from stiffened pouches creates informal economies, where cartridges become currency, subject to administrative oversight, preventing accumulation that might compromise collective mission requirements. The quartermaster performs his accounting litany beneath torn canvas, his voice carrying across salvage operations with mechanical rhythm that transforms administrative necessity into devotional practice. Kit recovered tallied against kit issued. Assistants echo figures, while the clerks record them in ledgers, absorbing battlefield reality into columns where loss becomes ratio, and ratio becomes policy. Casualties counted against rations consumed. Each phrase receives liturgical response, confirming that material balance has been achieved through calculations treating human resources as ammunition subject to inventory management. Ground gained measured against shells expended. The mathematics reconcile investment against return, according to formulas measuring territorial acquisition through human currency exchanged at rates determined by bureaucratic calculation rather than tactical necessity. Letters collected from pockets reveal their ultimate destination through processing that eliminates sentiment while maximizing resource utilization. The folded papers, softened by moisture and marked with ritual phrases copied in careful script, enter pulping machinery that reduces individual expressions to fiber, suitable for last-pack insulation. Their words dissolve into wadding that protects power cells from environmental damage, each promise of connection transformed into protective padding, stamped with cogwheel and skull icons, certifying mechanical purity. The recycling operates with closed-loop efficiency that converts personal correspondence into industrial materials while eliminating evidence of individual identity that might compromise institutional objectives. Pre-assault ration elevation receives explanation through calculations demonstrating institutional logic governing nutrition management according to operational requirements rather than humanitarian considerations. Fed soldiers advance farther distances before expiring through enhanced energy reserves, their improved performance justifying temporary resource expenditure that maximizes initial assault penetration according to predetermined parameters. Post-assault cuts restore baseline scarcity, while conserving supplies for extended operations, creating economic efficiency through systematic hunger that reinforces dependence on institutional support while eliminating excess nutrition that might encourage survival beyond designated operational timeframes. The accumulated mass of the dead receives disposition through systematized procedures, answering practical questions without ceremonial flourish. Consecrated pits provide burial when terrain permits excavation, and tactical conditions allow religious authority to sanction ground use for interment serving both sanitary and theological requirements. Lime treatment represents standard protocol for organic matter requiring accelerated decomposition in environments where conventional burial proves impossible due to soil saturation or enemy interdiction requiring immediate area clearance for subsequent operations. Where infrastructure permits comprehensive processing, rendering operations convert organic matter to lamp oil and corpse starch through industrial techniques, maximizing resource recovery while minimizing waste accumulation. These procedures remain unspoken but systematized, their efficiency measured through output calculations rather than moral considerations. Fat renders to illumination fuel for trench lamps, protein processes into ration supplements, while cloth and leather contribute to gasket work and equipment padding. The closed system wastes nothing organic while treating human remains as raw materials subject to industrial refinement according to established protocols that prioritize utility over sentiment. Survivors like 72491 face redeployment through administrative processes designed to correct statistical variance from projected casualty rates. Mine-clearing operations under fire provide accelerated expenditure opportunities for personnel whose continued existence represents mathematical problems requiring systematic resolution. The red stamp marking his glove indicates reassignment to duties where survival rates approach statistical certainty of elimination within predetermined timeframes, restoring compliance with projections through enhanced mortality exposure. Training cadre assignments utilize veteran experience to transmit doctrine to replacement personnel, while exposing instructors to cumulative risk through extended service duration. Their survival serves institutional purposes through knowledge transfer that reproduces conditioning in fresh recruits, though statistical analysis suggests eventual administrative correction through assignment rotation or enhanced duty requirements. Penal companies receive veterans whose excessive survival variance requires immediate correction. Their black ration satchels marking explicit designation for accelerated consumption according to formulas treating persistence as administrative, error requiring systematic elimination. Silence protocols forbid discussion of tactical failures through regulations criminalizing analysis that contradicts official assessments of operational success. Reports employ coded language transforming setbacks into acceptable resistance parameters, creating administrative fiction where defeat becomes variance from projections rather than institutional failure requiring procedural modification. The linguistic control eliminates criticism while maintaining morale through systematic denial of evidence contradicting doctrinal effectiveness, ensuring that battlefield reality conforms to bureaucratic requirements rather than tactical observation. The paperwork ascending command hierarchy carries sanitized assessments, treating human expenditure as successful resource utilization rather than tactical disaster requiring strategic reconsideration. Numbers travel upward through administrative channels where distance from battlefield conditions allows evaluation through purely statistical criteria, each level adding interpretation that further separates decision-makers from operational reality while reinforcing institutional logic. The calculations require review by authority, capable of determining whether exchanges represent worthwhile investments or wasteful consumption requiring procedural adjustment. Their decisions governing future operations through projections that treat human life as renewable resource subject to systematic harvesting, according to quotas rather than strategic objectives achieved through tactical competence. The ledger's journey through departmental hierarchy begins with physical transformation that mirrors its content's conversion from human reality into administrative abstraction. Sealed in leather satchels bearing wax and ash rather than conventional materials, field reports ascend through channels designed to distance decision-makers from operational consequences through systematic filtration of battlefield horror into statistical summaries suitable for bureaucratic consumption. At regimental level, clerks wearing respirator sheaths transcribe mud-stained figures into clean columns, their work performed in scriptorium chambers, where chemical filtration systems process air while administrative machinery processes death. Each transcription adds layers of interpretation that separate raw casualty data from individual suffering, creating documents where 724-91's survival becomes variance notation requiring procedural correction rather than human story-deserving consideration. Divisional depots receive these sanitized reports through cogitator networks that convert paper into data through mechanical precision, eliminating emotional contamination from administrative processes. Kit return ratios undergo keying into calculating engines. Casualty totals face reconciliation against ration draws, while ground gained receives mapping against ammunition expenditure through formulas treating territorial acquisition as mathematical function rather than tactical achievement requiring strategic evaluation. The Departamento's audit chambers reveal institutional architecture, where human calculators operate abaci, with priestly devotion, while cogitator banks hum through calculations, converting field reality into ratios suitable for year-on-year comparison across multiple theaters. Wallboards track throughput measurements in bodies per kilometer, rather than tactical objectives achieved, their displays cross-referencing human expenditure against filter hours, last cells, and promethium consumption, according to formulas that treat consciousness as commodity, subject to market optimization. Here emerges the central reframe that transforms understanding of Krieg's entire institutional purpose. Redemptive yield operates as managerial concept rather than mystical promise, its calculations performed by statisticians armed with actuarial tables rather than saints guided by divine inspiration. The planet's penance functions through throughput targeting, designed to sustain Imperial supply requirements, while managing planetary guilt according to psychological principles that maintain compliance through systematic manipulation of hope and despair. Loss rate tables occupy central positions in administrative chambers, their clean columns bearing headings for expected redemptive yield, variance tolerance, throughput targets, and kit return rates. These documents determine battlefield operations through projections calculated by clerks, whose margins carry notations regarding weather patterns, enemy doctrine, railway capacity, and population growth curves in Krieg's vault cities. The saints receive invocation in document headers, while decisions belong entirely to administrators whose competence lies in resource management rather than spiritual guidance or tactical wisdom. Krieg's famous fearlessness reveals itself as engineered property, produced through systematic conditioning, rather than natural devotion or spiritual transformation. The institutional machinery strips away avenues of refusal through creche programming that reduces individual identity to serial numbers, catechisms that treat breathing as taxation, white match testing that links hesitation to hunger, letter-writing exercises that teach futility through form, and mask protocols that replace faces with hissing metronomes. Obedience emerges not as choice, but as the only behavioral pattern remaining after systematic elimination of alternatives through environmental control and psychological conditioning. Survival becomes management problem, requiring systematic solution through rotation policies, preventing veteran accumulation that might threaten institutional stability through tactical competence or independent thought. Personnel exceeding predicted mortality rates face reassignment to clearance operations under observed fire, mine lane advancement through predetermined killing zones, or bunker approaches with limited cover. Duties selected because statistical analysis predicts normalization of survival curves through accelerated expenditure. Training cadre assignments utilize veteran experience to reproduce ethos in replacement personnel, while exposing instructors to cumulative risk through extended service duration that eventually requires administrative correction. The quartermaster's full catechism receives revelation through liturgical language that converts administrative necessity into religious observance while eliminating moral considerations from operational planning. Count the shells, count the souls, return the kit. The deficit is heresy. The surplus is waste. Each phrase reinforces institutional values, treating human consciousness as inventory subject to accounting procedures that measure efficiency through mathematical precision rather than individual welfare or tactical achievement. The Catechism transforms death into bookkeeping exercise while treating persistent survival as resource management problem requiring systematic resolution. Acceptable loss rates emerge from calculations performed by clerks whose authority derives from administrative competence rather than military experience, spiritual insight, or tactical wisdom. These functionaries possess actuarial training, enabling statistical analysis of human expenditure, according to supply chain requirements, their projections determining casualty rates that optimize Imperial resource allocation while maintaining planetary guilt management through psychological manipulation. Their decisions govern battlefield operations through mathematical models that ignore individual suffering while maximizing collective expenditure according to predetermined quotas. The moral inversion achieves completion through revelation that hope of redemption functions as control technology, designed to maximize both casualties and compliance through systematic manipulation of spiritual aspiration. The promise of absolution maintains morale while ensuring advancement into mathematics, where survival represents variance from acceptable parameters, requiring administrative correction through accelerated expenditure. Faith serves institutional purposes rather than individual salvation, its effectiveness measured through casualty statistics rather than spiritual transformation or tactical competence. The Death Korps represents Imperial military doctrine's logical endpoint, where human beings become ammunition, subject to systematic expenditure through bureaucratic efficiency that eliminates moral considerations from resource management. Individual consciousness dissolves into aggregate performance, measured through ratios comparing input against output, according to formulas treating souls as inventory items, subject to disposition when specifications prove inadequate for institutional requirements. This administrative machinery operates through compartmentalization that separates moral responsibility from operational consequences, allowing functionaries to perform duties requiring systematic elimination of human consciousness while maintaining psychological distance from individual suffering through procedures that convert death into statistical abstraction. The system's efficiency depends on hierarchical structure extending upward through administrative levels, where distance from battlefield conditions enables evaluation through purely mathematical criteria, creating institutional architecture that treats redemption as renewable resource subject to harvesting, according to quotas rather than strategic objectives. The bureaucracy administering systematic redemption requires examination of functionaries who translate statistical projections into operational reality through administrative competence divorced from moral consideration. These clerks audit souls through actuarial precision while remaining subject to oversight from superior authority, whose decisions determine whether calculations represent efficient utilization or wasteful consumption requiring procedural modification. When battalions consistently fall below yield projections, correction scales through exemplary expenditure orders, featuring more dangerous objectives, tighter timetables, and reduced support that increases exposure until statistical curves return to acceptable parameters through systematic application of scarcity and fire. The functionaries who translate statistical projections into operational reality operate at the intersection where administrative necessity acquires breadth and weight, transforming battlefield horror into ledger entries through procedures that treat human consciousness as inventory requiring systematic disposition. The quartermaster's dugout functions as both aid station and accounting office, its atmosphere heavy with promethium fumes, antiseptic, and the metallic taste of recycled air processed through filtration systems that clean atmosphere while calculating engines process death with mechanical precision. Daily triage operates through throughput calculations that justify medical intervention only when projected recovery enables continued operational contribution within acceptable timeframes. The quartermaster evaluates wounds according to standardized criteria, measuring treatment cost against expected utility, his gloved fingers moving between injury assessment and ledger notation with identical bureaucratic precision. Most wounds receive morphia and prayer rather than surgery because Doctrine prioritizes operational efficiency over individual preservation, treating medical supplies as finite resources requiring conservation for cases producing measurable return on administrative investment. Field medici understand the arithmetic without requiring access to actuarial tables. A lung puncture receives invocation and breath mask adjustment. A shattered femur earns morphia, rosary pressed to canvas glove, and reassignment to inventory pending disposition. Those requesting miracles hear the counting litany instead, delivered with quiet precision that eliminates hope while maintaining procedural compliance through religious observance converted into administrative efficiency. The mercy ampule criteria receive final revelation through clinical specifications, eliminating sentiment from medical decision-making while maintaining operational effectiveness through systematic euthanasia. Respiratory failure with compromised seals qualifies for intervention because mask damage prevents continued service while creating contamination liability, threatening unit effectiveness through atmospheric breach requiring immediate correction. Abdominal wounds exceeding operational timeframes earn dispensation when projected recovery duration conflicts with assault schedules, demanding immediate personnel replacement rather than extended convalescence, consuming resources without contributing to throughput targets. Fractures preventing movement during advances receive mercy, through calculations demonstrating that immobile personnel compromise unit effectiveness, while consuming supplies better allocated to operational soldiers. The glass ampules serve administrative purposes rather than humanitarian ones, their dispensation governed by efficiency requirements, treating individual suffering as secondary to collective mission completion. No heroics compromise schedules, because Doctrine eliminates medical intervention, conflicting with predetermined operational parameters, requiring systematic expenditure according to statistical projections. Identity seals undergo cross-referencing against issue logs through procedures, ensuring accurate casualty accounting while preventing inventory discrepancies that might compromise tithe calculations. Each metal disc receives verification against personnel records, equipment assignments, and operational status through administrative processes treating death as inventory transfer, requiring proper documentation. Equipment redistribution follows standardized protocols. Las rifles stripped from casualties undergo cleaning and inspection before reassignment. Gas capes receive contamination testing. Entrenching tools face blessing renewal. The seals bundle into leather pouches for casualty returns, satisfying departamento requirements, their numerical designations enabling statistical analysis while eliminating individual identity that might compromise collective objectives. The mask question receives definitive institutional answer through regulations governing respirator protocols with religious precision. Removal occurs only twice during standard service: childhood fitting, establishing proper seal configuration, and mortuary verification, confirming identity for casualty accounting purposes. Between these events, masks remain sealed through policies treating face exposure as operational liability, threatening both individual survival and unit effectiveness through contamination risk requiring systematic prevention rather than personal choice. The quartermaster maintains personal mask for contamination emergencies, its filters pristine in sealed storage despite operational requirements rarely justifying deployment. Years pass without use while he processes casualties whose masks failed under conditions his administrative privilege avoids, creating dry irony where protective equipment remains untouched while surrounded by systematic death requiring bureaucratic management. The contradiction highlights institutional hierarchy protecting functionaries while consuming operational personnel according to predetermined quotas. Administrative heresy consequences reveal the system's self-perpetuating logic through escalating measures designed to restore statistical compliance when yields fall below projections. When battalions underperform against targets, rations decrease to enhance motivation through systematic hunger. Bombardments intensify, creating tactical pressure, requiring accelerated advance, while exemplary measures increase through reduced support and tighter operational timeframes. The numbers must balance regardless of human cost, because institutional credibility depends on meeting quotas rather than achieving tactical objectives through competent leadership or strategic innovation. The system's mathematical logic creates conditions where failure to meet quotas generates requirements for higher quotas through escalating measures, increasing rather than decreasing human cost. Administrative success depends on casualty production rather than territorial gain, creating institutional incentives prioritizing statistical compliance over tactical competence through systematic elimination of alternative success metrics that might contradict predetermined projections. Supply reduction forces advancement into killing zones, artillery support withdrawal, increases enemy fire exposure, while operational tempo acceleration reduces recovery time until statistical compliance returns through accelerated expenditure rather than improved tactics. This arithmetic governed extended campaigns where generational quotas faced consumption through systematic expenditure exceeding sustainable replacement rates, forcing institutional modifications affecting Krieg itself rather than merely its military exports. One siege consumed resources beyond normal parameters, requiring administrative responses altering planetary policy through necessity rather than strategic choice, creating challenges where doctrine faced revision through mathematical imperative rather than moral consideration. The extended meat grinder demanded explanations for subsequent cohorts, whose conditioning required modification to account for operational realities exceeding previous projections. The extended campaign that consumed generational quotas found its ultimate expression in the 17-year siege of Vra Prime, where Krieger methodology faced testing beyond all previous parameters and proved its capacity for infinite escalation, provided sufficient human resources remained available for systematic expenditure. The fortress world became a laboratory for administrative doctrine, its layered defensive systems providing ideal conditions where warfare transformed into manufacturing process, measured through casualty production rather than territorial acquisition. Vrax offered the departamento planners everything their calculations required: a heretical rebellion demanding suppression, defensive positions necessitating prolonged siege operations, and terrain suitable for trench warfare, enabling systematic attrition across extended time frames. Death Korps regiments rotated through siege lines with mechanical precision, each deployment calculated to optimize throughput according to predetermined schedules that treated human consciousness as renewable resource subject to harvesting through bureaucratic efficiency rather than tactical competence. The siege lines expanded into underground cities where gas clouds functioned as seasonal weather patterns, their chemical composition varying according to wind direction and imperial bombardment schedules that treated atmospheric poisoning as environmental modification requiring systematic application. Phosgene drifted through spring months, while chlorine dominated autumn deployments, creating atmospheric conditions where breathing required constant vigilance and filter replacement according to administrative allocation rather than tactical necessity. Creeping barrages provided calendar markers, measuring time through percussion rather than chronometers, their advance timed to heartbeats, while Kriegsmen synchronized respirator rhythm with explosive percussion that replaced natural circadian patterns through institutional conditioning. Bunker complexes received assault through waves calculated for exhaustion rather than breakthrough, each attack designed to consume predetermined personnel quotas while achieving minimal territorial objectives requiring subsequent operations, maintaining statistical compliance with projections. Fortress sanctuaries faced bombardment and reconstruction in endless cycles, where destruction served administrative purposes rather than tactical ones, creating self-perpetuating warfare that eliminated resolution possibilities through systematic prevention of decisive victory that might compromise extended operations. Casualty rates achieved liturgical status through daily consultation of attrition tables determining operational parameters, their columns bearing headings for acceptable loss ratios, replacement schedules, and throughput optimization calculated by clerks whose authority exceeded field commanders in matters governing human expenditure. Assaults received planning for statistical compliance rather than tactical success, their objectives measured through bodies expended per kilometer, gained according to formulas treating territorial acquisition as secondary to casualty production, satisfying redemption quotas. Designation 72491 reappeared in clearance operations, his red deployment stamp directing him through mine lanes and wire gaps where survival rates approached statistical certainty of elimination within predetermined time frames. His daily letters continued through ritual precision, despite understanding their destination, each page folded twice before collection, by runners who delivered stacks for pulping operations, converting personal correspondence into last-pack insulation through industrial processes stamped with cogwheel and skull icons, certifying mechanical purity. The siege consumed entire creche vaults through accelerated deployment schedules, requiring premature graduation of cohorts whose conditioning remained incomplete, forcing institutional modifications, allowing younger personnel into combat roles traditionally reserved for fully processed soldiers. Planetary tithe increased beyond sustainable levels as Vrax demanded resources exceeding normal replacement capacity, creating domestic shortages affecting underground cities, where rationing tightened until civilian populations approached starvation levels, justifying increased recruitment quotas through economic necessity rather than devotional commitment. Domestic rationing created conditions where survival required military service, eliminating voluntary enlistment through systematic hunger that forced population into combat roles through administrative coercion rather than religious devotion. Underground manufactories shifted production from civilian supplies to military equipment, while workers received reduced rations, their labor producing ammunition, filters, and corpse starch for export to siege lines, consuming resources faster than planetary capacity could sustain without structural modification threatening civilizational stability. Victory arrived without fanfare, through absence rather than achievement, marked by quieter bombardments and revised requisition forms, rather than ceremonial recognition of tactical success. The fortress world's surrender generated administrative relief through reduced supply requirements, rather than strategic triumph deserving celebration. Its conquest measured through statistical compliance rather than territorial value or tactical competence, demonstrated through extended operations requiring systematic human expenditure. Earlier planted mechanisms achieved validation through industrial-scale application, proving institutional efficiency under extreme conditions. Corpse pits required consecration by thousands rather than hundreds, their blessing ceremonies becoming production line operations, where priests processed organic matter through religious observance scaled to match throughput requirements. Letters faced pulping by industrial bales rather than individual processing, their conversion to wadding achieving mechanized efficiency, treating personal correspondence as raw material subject to systematic recycling, according to wartime economy principles, maximizing resource utilization while eliminating sentiment. Identity seals accumulated in crates like currency, their collection requiring warehouse facilities rather than leather pouches as casualty accounting scaled beyond previous administrative capacity. The metal discs underwent sorting by numerical designation, weight verification, and cross-referencing against personnel records through procedures treating death as inventory management, requiring systematic organization, preventing accounting discrepancies that might compromise tithe calculations or redemption schedule compliance. The policy outcome traveled faster than relief ships through departamento memoranda, citing Vrax as validation that acceptable loss doctrine produced predictable yields across protracted timelines, while maintaining spiritual morale provided rituals continued and administrative procedures remained consistent. Throughput targeting achieved standardization into manuals, featuring tables annotated by case numbers rather than tactical analysis, transforming siegecraft into a counting methodology applicable across multiple theaters, requiring extended attrition campaigns, consuming human resources beyond normal parameters. Vrax proved that Krieg's doctrine scaled infinitely upward, provided sufficient human resources remained available for systematic expenditure according to predetermined quotas, demonstrating institutional capacity to sustain casualty rates exceeding replacement parameters through domestic policy modification, forcing civilian populations into military service while maintaining statistical compliance with departmental projections, measuring success through mathematical precision rather than tactical achievement or strategic value. Having mapped the institutions and mathematics governing systematic redemption through human expenditure across 17 years of industrial slaughter, examination must turn toward interior psychological landscape, where individual consciousness encounters conditions designed to eliminate personal identity while maintaining operational compliance. After Vrax consumed generational quotas through mechanized attrition, questions emerge regarding mental endurance behind gas mask glass, where breath becomes taxation and survival represents administrative variance requiring correction through accelerated expenditure, according to formulas treating souls as renewable resources, subject to harvesting through systematic application of institutional doctrine that transforms hope into control technology, maximizing both casualties and compliance through bureaucratic efficiency. The interior landscape, where consciousness encounters systematic elimination, reveals itself through psychological archaeology, examining what remains after institutional conditioning achieves completion across extended operations, consuming generational quotas through mechanized attrition. Designation 7224-91, surviving multiple clearance assignments through statistical variance, requiring administrative correction, demonstrates the mental adaptations enabling persistence within systems designed to prevent individual identity, while maintaining operational compliance through doctrinal conditioning. His interior weather operates through sensory replacement, where breath sounds become lullabies, providing comfort through mechanical rhythm rather than human connection, each inhalation measured against filter capacity, while creating percussion that synchronizes consciousness with institutional requirements. The rubber and ash taste, coating tongue and throat, transforms into familiar flavor, providing psychological stability through consistent contamination, eliminating natural appetite while reinforcing dependence on processed nutrition calculated according to operational requirements. The identity seal's weight against his chest provides constant reminder of numerical designation replacing personal history, its metal mass becoming meditation focus, where individual consciousness encounters institutional identity through physical pressure marking heartbeat rhythm. Zeal pairs with numbness through conditioning that eliminates emotional extremes while maintaining operational effectiveness, creating psychological state where prayer functions as metronome, providing rhythm rather than ecstasy, promising transcendence. Religious observance serves practical purposes through breathing regulation, time measurement, and group coordination rather than spiritual transformation, its effectiveness measured through operational compliance rather than personal salvation that might compromise collective objectives through individual deviation from predetermined parameters. Micro-kindnesses persist within regulations, governing every aspect of existence through bureaucratic precision, creating informal networks, providing mutual support through violations treating individual welfare as secondary to collective compliance. Veterans quietly swap fresh filters into younger soldiers' masks without acknowledgement, their actions violating supply protocols while demonstrating humanity surviving institutional conditioning. Surrendered ammunition passes between Kriegsmen during quiet periods, creating resource redistribution based on need rather than administrative allocation, while enemy burials receive performance with rote dignity, treating opposing casualties as fellow victims of systematic warfare rather than theological enemies deserving desecration. The respirator right hesitation receives its promised payoff through administrative mercy rather than execution, demonstrating institutional flexibility, accommodating variance within acceptable parameters while maintaining overall compliance with operational requirements. Faltering recruits whose childhood conditioning proved marginally insufficient face reassignment to worker battalions where digging and hauling provide slower penance through extended exposure to contaminated environments. They labor in deeper tunnels, moving timber and pumping slurry, their lives prolonged in arduous work until disease provides administrative closure, satisfying statistical projections through delayed rather than immediate expenditure. The system demonstrates capacity for graduated response, treating psychological failure as correctable variance rather than heretical rebellion requiring immediate elimination. Veterans exceeding 25 years represent statistical anomalies whose persistence creates administrative challenges, requiring specialized handling through assignments utilizing experience while preventing accumulation of tactical competence threatening institutional stability. These rare survivors receive instructor assignments serving dual purposes, transmitting doctrine to replacement personnel while exposing them to cumulative risk through extended service duration, eventually requiring correction through operational assignment or enhanced duty requirements. Names remain withheld despite seniority because individual identity contradicts collective mission regardless of service duration or tactical competence demonstrated through extended survival. Daily letter writing continues through ritual precision, despite complete understanding of destination, creating coping mechanism where meaningless activity provides psychological structure through routine rather than communication. Veterans read compositions aloud to empty air before surrendering pages willingly, their voices carrying words intended for recipients who exist only in memory, while accepting pulping operations, converting personal expression into industrial materials. The ritual demonstrates acceptance mechanism, where futility becomes comfort through systematic repetition, eliminating hope while maintaining sanity through structured activity, serving institutional objectives rather than individual needs. Crack analysis, examining potential refusal, reveals system completeness through channeling even rebellion into acceptable parameters, serving institutional objectives rather than individual liberation. Slipped rosaries provide personal comfort through religious objects, while reinforcing doctrinal conditioning. Whispered gallows humor creates psychological pressure. Release while maintaining group cohesion, and momentary hesitations receive quick correction through peer pressure rather than administrative punishment. Even these minor deviations are absorbed by the system, as statistical noise rather than genuine resistance, demonstrating psychological architecture that accommodates variance while preventing organized opposition. The system's psychological completeness shows in the way survivors self-correct their own statistical variance. Personnel who exceed predicted survival durations volunteer for clearance details and mine lane advancement, not from thrill-seeking, but from accounting. Instinct, having internalized Militarum variance calculations as surely as any catechism. They feel their continued existence as deficit requiring balance through accelerated expenditure, petitioning for assignments, carrying enhanced mortality expectations to restore compliance with projections generated by clerks measuring souls through identical precision applied to ammunition inventories. The interior landscape reveals void where individual identity should exist, consciousness reduced to operational parameters, and doctrinal compliance through conditioning, eliminating personal characteristics, conflicting with institutional requirements. Memory operates through fragmented images lacking emotional content, crash vault chambers, filter testing ceremonies, transport vehicles, trench construction, casualty processing. Personal history dissolves into administrative categories, while individual desires face pathologization as variance from acceptable parameters requiring correction through enhanced conditioning or accelerated expenditure, according to formulas, treating human consciousness as renewable resource subject to systematic harvesting. This systematic success demonstrates institutional capacity to manufacture souls calibrated for expenditure while maintaining operational compliance through conditioning that transforms survival into administrative problem requiring correction rather than achievement deserving recognition. The manufactured consciousness persists within conditions designed to eliminate individual identity, while demonstrating complete psychological subordination to collective mission requirements measured through statistical projections rather than personal accomplishment. One room exists where masks receive removal according to institutional protocols governing final verification and administrative closure. The quartermaster's unused mask awaits deployment through circumstances requiring contamination protection for functionaries whose administrative privilege normally prevents exposure to conditions consuming operational personnel. In that room, voices lower and numbers ascend while procedures begin that transform interior weather into none at all, marking transition from operational status to processed inventory through administrative completion that treats death as final accounting entry, rather than human tragedy, deserving recognition beyond statistical notation in ledgers, measuring souls through bureaucratic precision. The room where masks come off exists beneath vault lights that cast cold illumination without warmth, its canvas walls containing the final accounting where operational personnel transform into processed inventory through verification protocols as precise as any munitions audit. The mortuary tent breathes like institutional machinery, filters humming with steady rhythm, while lamps hang from support poles like altar candles, their promethium flames casting shadows that move with administrative precision. Across examination tables, where individual identity receives its final dissolution. Bodies arrive in systematic files, stretchers bumping over duckboards, through air thick with antiseptic and machine oil, each delivery representing completion of statistical projections rather than human tragedy deserving recognition. Here the fundamental rule bends according to institutional necessity. Masks are removed, not for relief or recognition, but for verification against identity seals through procedures ensuring accurate casualty accounting, while maintaining records required for departmental audits measuring efficiency through mathematical precision. The quartermaster enters carrying ledgers whose leather binding absorbs moisture from processed atmosphere, his gloved fingers moving between casualty identification and equipment cataloging with identical bureaucratic precision. Designation 72491 lies on examination table, where his respirator receives removal for final verification, the rubber peeling away from flesh marked by permanent indentations around nose and mouth. Features never seen by living comrades, individual characteristics eliminated through institutional conditioning that reduced personal identity to numerical designation serving administrative convenience. Names remain unspoken during verification procedures because individual identity contradicts collective mission regardless of service duration or tactical competence demonstrated through extended survival. A clerk reads numbers pressed into identity seals, while gloved hands lift chins to match ruined features against ledger entries, each confirmation mark contributing to statistical accuracy, while eliminating personal characteristics that might compromise institutional objectives through sentiment conflicting with operational requirements. The quartermaster's voice maintains procedural precision throughout final accounting, his words carrying administrative authority rather than pastoral comfort. Identity confirmed, kit recovered, service rendered complete. Each phrase marks transition from active personnel to processed inventory through bureaucratic language, eliminating emotional content while confirming completion of institutional obligations according to established protocols. Equipment undergoes systematic cataloging. Lazrafels stripped, dried, blessed, and re-racked according to standardized procedures. Bayonets find new scabbards after blessing renewal. Gas capes receive inspection for tiers compromising protective capability. Entrenching tools face consecration for continued service. Identity seals are snipped with cable cutters designed for electrical work, threaded onto leather thongs, counted by tens and hundreds, bundled and sealed for shipment to archive shrines, where numerical designations enable statistical analysis while eliminating evidence of individual existence. All planted hooks achieve resolution through systematic revelation, demonstrating institutional logic governing every aspect of existence within systems designed to eliminate individual identity while maximizing collective compliance. Ledgers count shells and souls because Departamento requires both for calculations measuring resource utilization against territorial acquisition according to formulas treating human consciousness as ammunition subject to inventory management. The arithmetic balances both sides of imperial faith, tonnage against battalions, ground gained against lives expended, each column recording exchange rates determined by clerks rather than strategic necessity. Letters surface among personal effects, softened by sweat and moisture, their penciled lines neat from vault school training. Runners deliver stacks to canvas drums, where cog priests feed them into chattering machinery, paper becoming fiber, fiber becoming wadding, wadding becoming insulation for laspacks stamped with cogwheel and skull icons. Private correspondence transforms into public function because sieges require material more than sentiment. the conversion achieving resource efficiency while eliminating evidence of individual identity through industrial recycling that wastes nothing organic. Masks receive removal only for childhood fitting and mortuary verification, because face exposure represents operational liability, threatening unit effectiveness through contamination risk requiring systematic prevention rather than personal choice. The quartermaster maintains his personal respirator in sealed storage, filters pristine, despite operational requirements rarely justifying deployment. Dry irony, where protective equipment remains untouched, while surrounded by systematic death requiring bureaucratic management. The unused mask awaits inheritance through administrative succession, passed to quartermaster designate, with ledgers that outlive their owners, like institutional creeds, requiring perpetual maintenance. Survivors face final redeployment through administrative processes designed to utilize remaining utility while preventing accumulation of tactical competence threatening institutional stability. Training assignments perpetuate the system through knowledge transfer, reproducing conditioning in replacement personnel, while clearance details provide accelerated expenditure opportunities for veterans whose continued existence represents mathematical problems requiring systematic resolution through enhanced mortality exposure, according to statistical projections, restoring compliance with departmental calculations. The arithmetic of redemption achieves complete expression through institutional architecture, where faith serves bureaucracy, while bureaucracy harvests faith through systematic manipulation of spiritual aspiration. Hope of absolution maintains operational compliance while ensuring advancement into mathematics, where survival represents variance from acceptable parameters requiring administrative correction through accelerated expenditure. Doctrine operates as logistics with liturgy. Engineer zeal to serve paperwork, let paperwork harvest zeal, converting guilt into governance and bodies into arithmetic through bureaucratic efficiency that eliminates moral consideration while maintaining operational effectiveness. Bleak Echo completes the cycle through image mirroring the opening trench scene, with complete understanding of institutional mechanisms governing systematic redemption through human expenditure. Far beneath dead sky, in creche vault corridors smelling of oil and damp wool, a child presses practice mask to face and counts until the hiss steadies. The instructor's voice comes thin through her own filter, repeating lines the trenches whisper at dawn. I am a number. I am a tool. I will be used. Nearby, a clerk sharpens pencil over fresh ledger and tests the point, preparing columns for casualties not yet born, while calculating quotas requiring systematic fulfillment through human expenditure, measured with identical precision applied to ammunition inventories. Cognitive closure emerges through understanding that existence within the Death Korps represents calibration for loss, followed by systematic consumption through methodical processes eliminating moral consideration while maintaining operational efficiency. To be in the Death Korps is to be manufactured for expenditure, methodically, efficiently, without complaint. Each breath requires taxation, paid through institutional compliance, individual identity, dissolving into operational parameters serving collective mission requirements, where survival represents administrative variance requiring correction through accelerated expenditure. The breathing tax achieves payment in full through systematic elimination of personal characteristics conflicting with institutional objectives, creating manufactured souls calibrated for expenditure, while maintaining statistical compliance with projections measuring success through mathematical precision rather than tactical achievement. The ledger closes with entries balanced according to accounting principles, treating death as inventory transfer, requiring proper documentation, while the cycle sustains through replacement personnel entering systems designed to reproduce identical conditioning across generational quotas. The breathing tax continues, exacted in full, column by column, breath by numbered breath, until breathing stops and the cost transfers to replacement lungs, drawing identical air through identical filters, while identical clerks sharpen identical pencils over ledgers whose columns await identical entries, measuring souls through bureaucratic precision that converts guilt into governance without remainder, complaint, or end.